Hi everyone, it's me, Dr. Whimsy, and I'm just shooting this video in my home right before I get on a plane to Seattle for Thanksgiving. Hopefully you'll all be seeing it on Thanksgiving or soon after. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of learned helplessness, how we can sometimes learn to be helpless or believe that we're incapable of doing something. And I truly believe that a lot of people stay in poverty because of this internal belief system that they are helpless and that they are not without choices. This is one area where I think Dave Ramsey has made some valid points. While it's true statistically that some areas in the United States have depressed economies and it's very hard to get ahead, and it's going to be a lot harder for some of us than others to become rich, that doesn't mean that it's impossible. And we always have to be looking to our internal belief systems and challenging our internal belief systems if we are going to break the cycle of poverty. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's fair, and I'm not saying that all of us start at the same playing field. I'm just saying question whether or not some of your challenges with money might be internal belief systems. If people want to collab this video, I think that would be great. And we can have an open discussion in the frugal community about this idea of learned helplessness. Tell me your story. What have you learned over the years that led you to believe you were helpless, that you couldn't do it? I'm going to go ahead and give you two of my own personal examples. The first example of learned helplessness that I can remember has to do with learning how to drive a car. When I was younger, I just delayed learning how to drive a car. I didn't want to do it. I was scared. I was worried that I was going to get into an accident. And so I kept delaying until I eventually believed that I was incapable of learning how to drive a car. I was helpless. I had an internal belief system that I was helpless and that somebody else needed to drive me around because I was incapable of doing it myself. Now I like to say that aristocrats do not drive, they are driven. That's my way out of having to drive. But at the age of 48, I decided to take driving lessons, and it was very difficult. The average driving instructor gets hired for about 6 to 10 hours of professional driving, and then the rest of the time is usually done with family. I paid the driving instructor for 40 hours. That is how much anxiety I had. And they brought in a special driving instructor who was trained to deal with people who are afraid of driving. I remember the first time she got me on the freeway, I went so hysteric she had to take the wheel. So it was a big challenge. But I ended up passing my driver's license and getting my license, and I think I took something like a 99%. I took an extremely high score. And I think the reason why was because I was so prepared and I had done the work. So that would be a typical example of where my internal belief systems limited my world, limited my possibilities and options in life, and nobody had put me in that cage but myself. My own belief systems put me in that cage. And then when I came to realize that I was the one that created it, that I was the one that created this myth, I was able to face the fear and in a responsible way move past it until eventually I was able to conquer my goal of being able to drive. I also want to talk a little bit about learning and education. There are a lot of people who remain in poverty because they are not educated. If we go into prison populations, we often find that a large percentage of people who are in prison can't read, can't write. There's a high incidence of illiteracy, and that population of people may come to believe that they are not particularly intelligent, they're not particularly bright, they can't get a regular job, they can't earn an income in a legitimate way, and so because they believe that they are helpless, maybe they feel compelled to break the law or come up with creative ways to make money. But then various different universities have done experiments where they've gone in and offered college courses to these prisoners, and not only did the prisoners excel and do brilliantly in school, but they beat Harvard in a debate. I'll put the information above about the prisoners in New York that went against Harvard in a debate and slaughtered them in a debate because they fought so hard for that education. And what we've learned from students is that you have to go over a material that you're learning about 4 times before you begin to grasp that concept. So if you fail the first time you learn something, if you're in school and you look over the stuff and say, I have no idea what the heck this is, just skim it the first time. Look at the pictures and skim it. The second time, I want you to do a close reading of the material. The third time, you're going to go over it again, and you're writing stuff down and you're taking notes, and you might want to read it out loud or explain it to somebody else to see where your holes are at. And then the fourth time you're going over it, you're probably going to begin to enter the area of mastery, where you're now going to start to master that information. The first time you look at anything, particularly the sciences, do not be surprised if the first time you read that biology chapter, it makes no sense. It's not because you're stupid, it's because it's hard material, and it's going to take you 4 good reads before the clouds lift. Have that dictionary there, ready to look up any terms you don't understand. The same is true for math. You didn't fail because you're stupid. Maybe you failed because you didn't go through it 4 times. And the reason we don't go through something 4 times is because we give up the first time we fail, the first time we don't understand it, and then we use that to reinforce this myth that we are helpless. All right, so at the end of this conversation, I'm going to recommend a book, and the book is Mastery by Robert Greene. Mastery by Robert Greene. And I would like you to check it out. You can check it out at your library. You can buy it on Amazon used. It's an important book to read, and it talks about what it takes to master anything in life, whether it's being a great musician or a great writer, or being a master, a success at your business. And he found on average that people had to spend about 10,000 hours of directed study towards a particular goal. Now, we can spend 10,000 hours trying to do something, but if it isn't directed, if it isn't focused, if it isn't productive hours, we're not going to get very far. We're talking about productive hours. 10,000 hours have to be devoted to your small business, say, if that's what your goal is, before you start to see a business that is attaining mastery. We want a business that's going to be resilient, that's going to survive any drops in the economy. If we head towards another recession, will our business survive? We want a recession-proof business. We want to know our business inside and out. We want to know every aspect of our business in case we have to take over, in case we're outsourcing. We need to know the accounting. We need to know how to do the web pages. We need to know how to do the YouTube and the social media. And most of all, we need to do the thing that we were put there to do. For me, it's being a naturopathic doctor. So that is the purpose of this video that I put out for you today. The purpose of this video is to challenge you and ask yourself, did you give up too soon? Did you give yourself the time to fail and fail and fail again as you evolved towards mastery? And until you have failed something multiple times, you really cannot say you've tried. There was one example in the book Mastery by Robert Greene that I wanted to leave you with, and that is the story of the Beatles. And I'm a huge fan of the Beatles. You can watch the Beatles anthology documentary on YouTube, and I think it's very inspirational, particularly the first couple of episodes of the Beatles anthology. I think there's 11 episodes. But in the Beatles anthology, it shows just how many hours the Beatles put into mastering music before they became the Beatles, and how much help they had along the way. They had a great producer, they had tons of help, but they went to Germany at one point early in their career, and they were in Hamburg, and the man who owned the club made them play straight music. They had to keep playing for like 8 hours until they were ready to drop with their musical instruments. And then after that 8 hours were done, they sat around and played for fun and continued to experiment with other creative ideas with music. Most bands don't put in 10, 11, 12 hours a day for a year or 2 years. By the time the Beatles had come back to the United States, they had mastered their craft, and then they had to gone back to Great Britain. They had mastered their craft, and then they went on the road and they performed over and over and over and over and over again all over Great Britain. So that is an example of how much work it takes to master something. Just remember that nobody is good at something initially. That's kind of a myth. Research shows that the people who are considered brilliant or masters have put tens of thousands of hours into something. I used to think when I was a pre-med student, I was an American going pre-med student at 33 years old, I started that dream. And I used to work with people who were immigrants from Cambodia and China and Laos, and I used to think, well, they're just so much smarter than I am. But then I ended up living in the dormitory with all the pre-med students from Laos and China and Cambodia, and they would get up at 5:30 in the morning and make strong green tea, and they would exercise, and then we would study and study and study and study and study before we would get to class. And then after class, we would make a meal together of rice and vegetables and whatnot. And then we would study some more and more and more and more. And had I not lived with that group of students, I don't think that I would have made it into medical school. They taught me how much work it takes to really achieve mastery. So think about this topic. Learned helplessness. How have you limited yourself? And if you want to do a collab video with me, with Broke Aristocrats, I think that would be great if we could collab this video and share this, and maybe we can inspire each other to push against those internal limitations, challenge each other so that we can achieve our dreams, both financially, but spiritually, and in every other aspect of our lives. Okay, thank you for watching. This is Broke Aristocrats. Be sure and share, like, subscribe, and tell me what you are doing to take care of yourself on a budget. Bye-bye.